You're listening to Health Coach Conversations, a podcast where our conversations help health coaches all around the world to level up our businesses and to get more clients. Hello and welcome. Today, I am with Eric DeGotti. Eric has spent the past 25 years in the fitness industry as a coach, trainer, and instructor. Each year, Eric travels around the world teaching and speaking to trainers, coaches, and therapists as the lead instructor for functional movement systems and guest speaker for such prestigious organizations as Mount Sinai Hospital, New York University Medical, the Navy SEALs, the Mayo Clinic, and multiple major universities. Eric has also appeared in the New York Times bestseller, The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Cathy?
Good. How do many fitness professionals limit themselves by staying within the safety of their silos? And what is the safety of their silos?
This concept is something I came up with, is that when I go out and teach and educate trainers and coaches and clinicians, which I've been doing for over the last 15 years, is that a lot of them come in with these labels, and it's whether it's their elevator pitch type of thing, where they're a kettlebell guy or they're a Pilates person or something like that. And they stick with something that caught their attention as something that really drew them in from a passion standpoint and that they had success with, but they never leave that lane. And everything then is seen through the lens of that. Because of that, they lose out on a lot of other things. So if you're that kettlebell person and everything has to be surrounded and wrapped around that, you don't realize that person next to you who may do something completely different, who may do yoga, that you could learn a lot from them and they could learn a lot from you. But if you're trapped in your silo, neither of you grow, and it ends up being at the detriment of your clients.
That makes sense. They've narrowed their niche too much.
Yes. And it doesn't mean you can't still specialize. Mm-hmm. It just means that you're cutting off your ability to really have a robust skill set because you're cutting off your learning and limiting it to that one lane and only seeing it through that perspective. I always try to take the perspective that is anything I learn, I try to learn what the people who don't like that say to see if I can figure out which one do I jive most with.
What are the key questions that are critical to not only building trust, but are essential to your program's success?
A lot of what I've taught over the years is teaching coaches and trainers and clinicians how to do physical assessments of how to check your range of motion or your stability or your balance and so forth. When the most important assessment is a good conversation and asking some really good questions. Like if I don't ask you, Cathy, what you do throughout your day, and I find out that you do some type of manual labor, and then I programmed in farmer's carries as part of your exercise, like you've just been carrying bricks all day. The last thing you need to do is do that. Or if I don't understand that you sit at a desk and chair all day, or that you travel a lot, all those things are going to have physiological, structural inputs into your body that I need to appreciate because I'm getting a little window of time with you. I may get a couple times a week at most for a couple, maybe an hour, 45 minutes an hour. What you're doing 8 to 10 hours a day is extremely important. So that's just one big key question that if you miss that, your whole program could be trash.
You know what? I've been working with a physical therapist for a sore hip. And I went to her. She didn't ask me anything, just exactly like what you said. And she told me that the reason I was having a problem was because I was walking on ground that wasn't level. So I needed to make sure, and I do a lot of walking. So I needed to make sure when I went one way, I turned around and came back the other way. Well, after about 4 weeks of not getting better, I started wondering. So I've got a different chair here today. I've had one of those Aaron chairs, which is past its expiration date, probably 2006. Yeah, it's seen its day. Anyway, we took the level on it and it was crooked. And I sit in my chair all day long, except for to get up every once in a while and sneak away. And I swear that's what my problem is. But if you don't ask those questions, you don't find out. And you're not going to solve the problem, right?
Yeah. And there's a process that I always like to talk about removing the negative. The best part of programming is not always what do I add in, but sometimes what I need to take away. Mm-hmm. And the analogy I use is if I was the greatest track coach in the world and you want to come to me so you can run faster, but you have a thumbtack in your shoe, my skills don't matter. So I got to remove the thumbtack first. And so I need to look at what are some of the barriers that I need to remove first. But unfortunately, what happens in our field, and I did it when I was young and not all that smart, I wanted to impress you and I wanted to give you a bunch of things. And so if you said, oh, my hip hurts, oh, let me show you all the stretches I know for your hip. And let me show you the exercises I know for the hip. When without stopping and asking the question of why does it hurt in the first place? And why is it your right hip and not your left hip? And why is it your hip and not your low back? And what are some of the activities you do throughout the day? And is there anything that led to this? And let me look at your injury history and your medical history and all these sorts of things that show me the whole puzzle, as opposed to just picking at one thing and doing what I call this for that type of approach.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. What are some of the most important tests and assessments that should be done?
What's the most important thing is the conversation. Get to know the individual. In terms of once we actually get into rolling our sleeves up and doing some physical tests, I want to see how well do you move? Can you at least meet certain minimums? Like, can you touch your toes? Can you reach back behind you? Can you rotate right to left? Can you balance on one foot? These are some very fundamental things that if you can't do those, well, then that's going to change how I pick your exercise program. Because if you can't touch your toes, having you lift weights from the floor is not a good idea. If you can't reach your hand behind you, like you're going to scratch your back, and I should probably have you lifting weights up overhead. And then also I need to know, what if one of those movements hurts? If it hurts for you to rotate to the right, and I don't find that in advance, I'd rather find that out in a low level movement test than find it out while we're exercising. And all of a sudden, okay, Cathy hurt her back while she's working out with me. A, that's not real good for business. B, that's going to set us back where we could have avoided that and cut it off at the pass. So that's one of the things. Look at just your fundamental movements before I go and program any exercises. What are your fundamental movements? Then there's some other tests, more global tests that I like to do to kind of look at where you're at from a bigger scale. So one of those things, Dr. Andy Galpin, I took this from, he talks about using a quadrant system. And what that is we have a sheet with 4 boxes, and those boxes each represent a part of your life. And so one box would be your family and your relationships. One box is your work and your career. Another box is your physical activity or training. And then another box is your recovery. And then what you do is I'm going to give you a budget of 10 points, and you're going to lot them across those 4 boxes. And it can be really eye-opening. The example I give is I have a client who's saying, I've been training great, but I just don't bounce back from my workouts. I'm always sore. I feel always beat up. And I said, okay, I took out the whiteboard. Let's go through the quadrants. He was at times selling his business. He's like, that business is a 5. I'm really going full steam with that. Okay, so what's family? Well, I'm trying my best to keep the family stuff together. That's 3. Workouts, activity. I'm keeping up with the workouts. All right, that's another 2. Well, there's nothing left here. You have nothing to recover. And so no wonder you're always sore all the time. It's an eye-opening thing to say, like, okay, we just need to adjust things for the time being, because you're not going to quit your job. You're not going to stop talking to your family, but we need to then adjust the other variables, because if we don't understand that going in, you're going to have somebody that's beat up and sore all the time. Again, not good for business and not great for progress.
How do you individualize and scale your exercise prescription to meet the unique needs and abilities of each client? And I was wondering too, you look at ages, somebody that is 29 years old can move a lot easier than somebody that's 60 years old.
It depends on the 29 and 60-year-old, because I've seen some really poor moving 29-year-olds and some great moving 60-year-olds. If you met me at a party and said, can you write me an exercise program? I can get out a napkin. I could put something together that'll be a good general fitness program. And then what you're going to do is look at it and say, this is great, but you're going to give me some limitation afterwards. But I don't have the equipment for this, or I don't have this space to do this, or I don't know how to do all these things, or I have an upper body injury or a lower body injury, or you have some sort of limitation in there that I'm going to have to adjust that program. Of all the 10 to 12 limitations that I have that would adjust a program, age is not one of them. It's never a limitation. And so with that, the limitation is, okay, is it that you don't move well? Is it that you have poor recoverability? Is that you don't have good exercise skill? One of those things is a limitation. So that I don't use the lens of age changing things, but how you do scale it is once you factor it for the limitation, I came up with this concept of a belt system. What that is in the martial arts, they have colored belts to put you where you should be and meet you where you're at. And the reason why they do that is if you walk into a dojo day 1 and they threw you in with the black belts, 1, you're going to get your butt kicked. 2 is the black belt's going to get nothing out of that. And so we need to scale it so it meets where you're at. And so if we look at exercise and how I categorize it, if everything we do can be broken into about 9 basic movement patterns that we would do. And then, okay, once we pick one of those movement patterns, I have this belt system where I kind of scale, if we're going to squat as an example, to say, okay, can you even squat to a full squat if I gave you something to hold on to with just your body weight? Can you do that? If you can't do that, well, we may have a movement problem, going back to what we were talking about earlier, and we need to fix that first before we even think about squatting with you. So that's going to be off the list for now. Or if you could do that, can you do it without holding on to anything? Okay, if you could do that, can you do it with holding a certain percentage of your body weight? Well, if you could do that, then let's progress it as per your goal. So we have this non-biased type of way to kind of figure out where we meet you where you're at. And then it kind of takes away the preference type of idea. Because at the end of the day, I've been programming exercises for over 25 years. If you came to me for a program, I'm going to be honest, I don't really care what exercises you do. It makes no difference to me. So I'm going to let you write your program for me. And that's going to be based on the assessment that we do to see, you're going to tell me exactly where you're at. And it may be at one level for one pattern, another level for a different pattern, but it's going to meet you where you're two things, where you're successful, where you can do the exercises without pain and to the level that we need you to do them to, but you're also challenged enough that it's going to create some change. It's going to create where you're going to get stronger or more muscle or whatever your desired adaptation and goal is.
So you're not stuck at one level. Hopefully you'll do it well enough that you'll move from one belt to the next belt.
1,000%. Yes. And some people, there's a lot of people who are practicing martial arts for a long time who don't have aspirations of a black belt. They just appreciate the practice, and that's okay. I don't need everybody to be a black belt in exercise, but you should at least be a white belt. That's the lowest level. And if you're not, it's my diligence to get you to at least that level, to give you a minimum level of physical capacity that you can go and do the things that you need to do. I always joke that if working out regularly, but you still can't help me move a couch, well, then we need to look at your program. You should be able to go about, if you're going to do some yard work or you're going to go up a flight of stairs with a laundry basket, that you don't have to have two things. One, you don't have to be huffing and puffing and not being able to do it. And more importantly, you don't have to have your fingers crossed that I'm going to get hurt if I do this.
Right.
Join a community of dedicated health professionals at the Health Coach Group. Share knowledge, gain support, and grow your practice with like-minded individuals. Become a part of our community at thehealthcoachgroup.com.
What's the difference between the majority of fitness coaches and the top 1% of the industry?
It is having a process and a system. And the biggest thing to delineate and how you could tell, if you were to walk in off the street, is, are they giving me a program or are they giving me workouts? I can go and stop at 10 places on the main road of my town that I can walk in and I will do a workout. And that workout is going to be the same workout, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether I came in or didn't come in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. A good friend of mine in his spare time became a spin instructor. Taking his class doesn't necessarily correlate to my goal. It's not specific to what my needs are, but it's fun. I go and take it. That's okay. But a program is saying, here's where you are today, Cathy. Here's where you want to be. Here's all the steps it's going to take to get you there. Some things it's going to be removing the negative. Some things are things we need to add. Some things we need to change. But that's a program, is we're taking you from where you are to where you want to be. A workout is just that. Now, a workout is a part of a program, but that's really the biggest difference, is that if someone comes into you and says, okay, well, what are we looking to accomplish? And even you walk into the physical therapy setting, they immediately classified you as, Cathy's here with the bad hip. It wasn't, well, what does Cathy want to do? Like, does Cathy want to go back and she likes to dance? Cathy wants to ride her bike or play tennis or whatever it is. If that question doesn't come up, you're not in the top 1%.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you want to do? That's very interesting, because that's really what motivates you to make the change anyway, isn't it?
That's the why. If I don't find out your why, then I'm just giving you workouts. And you know what? You can get workouts for free on YouTube. You can get them for free on Instagram. You don't need to pay me for that. That's really the differentiator of why people will drive an extra 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to see the top 1% person and drive past a lot of other 99% people to get there.
And it's not really great to assume the reason that, what did those physical therapists assume that I want out of this? Well, their number one assumption is that I want to get rid of pain.
Yeah, and that's a pretty low bar to set. That's great, but then what? And then the other question, well, okay, well, why did this happen in the first place? How do I stop it from happening again? Or am I just going to perpetually be here for 3 times a week?
Yeah, that's the thing, is if you don't fix what caused it, then you're not really going to fix anything. So you do more than, you still coach people directly, but you also work with coaches, right?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
And so I have a project with a partner, Mike Perry, who's in the Boston area, and we have something called Principles of Program Design. And we teach coaches and trainers and clinicians basically how to create programs, but we teach you it through the lens of the entire client journey. From the time you walk, my first interaction with you, to the time you walk in the door, the questions I need to be asking, the communication I need to have, what are the assessments I need to do? What do I then do with that information? Then how do I build a program? And then how do I adjust that program based on the Cathy that walks in the door today may not be the Cathy that walks in the door next week, because maybe she had a long plane flight, or maybe she, is stressed out at work, or those types of things. And do I have the ability to adjust that program when that does happen? Do I have a plan for when she does get better so she continues to be challenged? Or do I just have one cookie cutter plan for everybody? And how do I continually get you to be successful and challenged? How do I continually to find new ways for you to discover new things about yourself? And I've had clients literally for over 20 years. And it's not because I'm giving them new, cool, fancy exercises every time they come in the door. It's because they know there's always a plan. I'm always looking ahead. It's not just about, hey, what do we want to do today? It's looking ahead to say, okay, well, what do we want to be accomplishing in 3 months from now? Oh, well, I have a beach vacation, or I have a major golf tournament, or I have whatever it may be. And we're planning for that well in advance. You're not working reactively. We're proactively trying to go at things, and also discovering to say, well, wow, if I didn't think I could do this, imagine what I could do a month from now, what I could do 6 months from now.
Yeah. So do you work only with people that work in physical coaching, or do you work with people who are in like lifestyle management? Do you narrow it down to that one area?
I don't narrow it down to just the physical. I have to look at everything. If I don't look at everything, I'm going to miss the boat. The approach that I use is based on a concept I call the 3 big things. We met at a party and you say, okay, well, what do I need to do to look and feel and perform my best? And say, you really need to do 3 things. You need to move, you need to fuel, and you need to reset. What does that mean? Well, those 3 things can be broken down to further subsets of 3 things. In terms of moving, you need to be able to move well, do all the things I talked about before, and you can do that pain-free. You should be able to move often. Like you can go out and go for a long walk or hike or ride your bike and not have to huff and puff and get worn out. And you should be able to move with some purpose. You should be able to, like I said, move a couch. You should be able to run up a flight of stairs, that kind of things. And then if we look at fuel, we have to look at not only the food you eat, we got to look at, are you hydrated? And then we also got to look at, fuel is not just what we put in our mouth, it's what we put in our eyes and ears as well. So we have to look at, like, if you break down that a little bit more, like what are your inputs, like the TV you watch, the people you hang around with, all those types of things, that's going to have an influence as well. Nobody ever said, oh, I feel so much better after scrolling through Twitter for the last half hour. And so that's going to change things. That's under fuel. And then under reset is your body's ability to recover. And the first conversation we have is understand that exercise and training is just planting the seeds. If you don't give me soil for those seeds to grow in, it's like planting them on concrete. And so the reset is where it gives me that fertile soil. And the reset is your sleep. Your reset is looking at your ability to manage your states and where are you at in terms of managing your autonomic nervous system and stress levels. All those things come into place. I have to look at those 23-hour factors. Now, we just keep getting more and more narrow. It gets to a point where nutritionally, if you really need someone focused, I'm going to refer you to some really good nutrition coaches that we need. But usually, most of the problems are solved more upstream. To say, the joke one of my mentors taught me is someone walks in your office and they're smoking a Marlboro and drinking a glass of gin, and they say, well, what's the best brand of fish oil for me to buy? We got bigger problems to solve here. So that's usually what happens is we look for sound bites on social media or the news, And we're saying, oh, I shouldn't buy this type of, I shouldn't eat bananas or I shouldn't do this. And it's like, no one's come to me in 25 years and gotten fat or feels like crap because they eat bananas. There's a bigger problem here, and it's usually further upstream. And that's why I look at the big three things. Are they in order first? And then we look at the next three things. And then we look at the next three things. And so that way of looking holistically, but always zooming out first before we zoom in, allows us not to lose the forest through the trees.
Very good. So the coaches that you're looking to work with, what kind of certifications do you want them to already have before they come to you?
They don't necessarily have to have any. Like I said, we work with everyone from fitness trainers and group fitness instructors to personal trainers, strength coaches, and even clinicians, athletic trainers, and physical therapists, and looking for them to see what the 1% does. We've been fortunate enough that myself, being able to work under some of the best people in the world and seeing how they go about things and their mindset. And that's what has forever changed how I've gone about things. And I want to be able to pass that forward and pay that forward and say, look, this is the stats in the fitness industry. Most personal trainers are in and out of the business in 6 to 24 months. Because they say, oh, I like fitness. Oh, I like people. I want to help people. And then they get in, they think it's just showing people exercises. And then they realize, okay, well, if I just show people exercises, I don't really build a name for myself because I can get free exercises on YouTube, like we said earlier. And I also it gets mundane after a while, where it's, if you're looking at, okay, I'm connecting, my experience with training Cathy is completely different than my experience in training Joe is, then it's completely different than the experience in training Barbara was. And so each one of those is this new journey and challenge to see, okay, how do I get the very best out of this person and give them a path to discovering their best side? And to people, that's really where you build a career. That's where you build a name for yourself. That's where you can charge the higher rates and you get people who will drive to come see you, and you can become something that leaves a legacy in the career, as opposed to I just kind of do it to pass the time. And it's no different than breaking rocks at the local quarry.
Right. Well, it sounds like you have something that can really help a lot of people with coaching. Thank you so much for being here with me today. We have, is this your website, Principles of Program Design?
Yes, principlesofprogramdesign.com. And that's where you can find out all the information about our courses. You can get in touch with us, as well as we also have a podcast where we interview some of the top coaches, clinicians, trainers in the world that we do as well.
Very good. Well, we'll put this underneath the podcast and everybody get in touch with you.
Awesome. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes.